I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
She's not even a child anymore! You have to let her grow up!
Love her, but don't try to possess her.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
Absolutely out of the question.
So far in this series, we focused only on fantasy films from the 80s, but this episode, we're going to branch out to a more modern movie, but one firmly rooted in the style and films of the 80s fantasy genre. MirrorMask would be right at home on a shelf next to Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, and there's a reason for that. While it was released in 2005, MirrorMask was inspired by both of those films and would come from the same house, that of the Henson company. It would also spring from the mind of one of the fantasy genre's kings, Neil Gaiman, and artist Dave McKean, who helped create some of the most striking visual art of the last few decades in comics for DC, Dark Horse, and so much more. MirrorMask is both modern and classical. It's dark, light, beautiful, and terrifying. Much like the characters within it, it crosses between two worlds.
I don't really know where I am.
This is a perfect time to travel back to the world created by two masters of magic as we await not only the first live-action appearance of Gaiman's Sandman, but the second series of Good Omens. So let's grab a really useful book and maybe not pet the cats as we prepare to enter the realms of MirrorMask.
Answer my riddle, and only then you can pass. Fail, and I devour you, bones and all.
Let me take this opportunity to thank you all for watching Fantasizing About Fantasy Films, and ask that if you enjoyed our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. Now, back to the show. MirrorMask was inspired by Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal, both films which in the late 90s and early 2000s had a resurgence thanks to DVD and kids who grew up with the films returning to them time and again. The Henson company wanted to find another dark gem, slight pun intended, within the fantasy genre. Sequels and prequels to both Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal were tossed about, with The Dark Crystal eventually getting a prequel series on Netflix a few years ago. But it was decided that a new story would be the focus. Lisa Henson, Jim's daughter and CEO of the Henson Company, contacted Neil Gaiman about interest in writing the film and working with Dave McKean on the project. McKean had done some short films as well as collaborated with Gaiman on previous work, including a number of comics. The two agreed and began working at the Henson's home on ideas. Again, there are some similarities that came from Labyrinth, which both Gaiman and McKean make no qualms about, but MirrorMask actually follows a different path for the young woman at the story's center of self-discovery. MirrorMask, in a way, is the dark reflection of Labyrinth. Again, no pun intended, and is in every way the combination of Gaiman and McKean in both story and appearance.
Oh, this is a dream or not, we're definitely heading the right way.
MirrorMask follows the teenager Helena, who would appear to be seemingly living the dream of every child by living in a circus that is ran by her parents.
That ends. Helena, juggle. Helena, sell the popcorn. Helena, smile for the punters.
It's an old-fashioned looking affair and obviously family ran, with Helena's parents performing multiple acts and characters themselves, along with the rest of the troupe. In a twist, Helena dreams of running away from the circus, as she's tired of having to work and deal with the stresses that come from the way of life. The night of the current performance, she and her mother get in a fight because Helena isn't prepared to go on stage, and when her mother says,
"You're gonna be the death of me,"
Helena whispers,
I wish I was.
After already having performed an aerial routine, her mother, while preparing to go on during Helena and her father's comedy juggling skit as a gorilla, collapses and has to be taken to the hospital. Some days later, Helena is staying at her nan's while her mother is still in the hospital, the circus having stopped performing while they await the news of her outcome. Helena blames herself, and it's obvious that things aren't going well for her father financially, as the other performers appear ready to leave and go on to greener pastures. That same day, she gets the news that they plan to operate on her mother. It's highly implied she has some sort of cancer or tumor in her brain. Helena, a talented artist, has decorated the walls of her room and roof of her nan's apartment with designs of another world she's created. That night, she finds herself awakened in that very world, populated by familiar, dream versions of her friends and a man in a mask named Valentine. It seems everyone in this world wears a mask, or very nearly everyone. Valentine and Helena barely escape from an evil shadow-like entity that devours Valentine's partner and anything it comes into contact with. The two are taken to the minister of the City of Lights, who appears to be Helena's father. The Queen of Light, who resembles Helena's mother, has been placed under a spell due to the Princess of Shadows stealing a charm from the city and escaping to another realm.
You keep talking about a charm. What kind of a charm?
Everyone thinks Helena is the princess as they look identical, but the loss of the charm has created an imbalance, and so the worlds of both light and dark are slowly disintegrating. Helena and Valentine must get back the charm and find the MirrorMask in order to set things right and return the Princess of Shadows back to her world before everything ends. But this isn't going to be an easy quest, and both Valentine and Helena learn some hard truths about themselves along the way.
He said the charm was a mirror mask.
Filming began in 2003 with the location of the film set in Brighton, as McKean thought it was more bohemian and more logical place for a circus to take place in. MirrorMask took about a year and a half to complete filming. McKean had a budget of around $4 million, which he was able to stretch thanks to using newly graduated film and animation students. McKean's designs were beautiful, creepy, and stunning. In interviews, McKean stated he was heavily inspired by silent films such as Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and German Impressionism, and it shows in the landscapes that are skewed and angled. They would be right at home with Cesare stalking them. The designs also truly do look like Helena's drawings come to life. MirrorMask at times looks as though it's stop motion, but then you realize it's more than that. I can't think of another film that resembles it.
This is bizarre.
It's supposed to be a dreamscape, and it truly is. It's stunningly dark and beautiful and creates a perfect atmosphere for what the story is. It's not only the visuals here that make MirrorMask so striking. Gaiman and McKean created a story that's one of self-discovery, but also talks to the pains we go through, especially as teenagers, when life hits us with emotional turmoil. The quote-unquote MirrorMask is a perfect phrase for what Helena goes through as she watches the Princess of Shadows taking over her life and doing things she said she'd never do. While her mother is sick and possibly going to die, Helena's shadow self acts out against her father, makes out with bad boys, smokes, and rebels against everything just as many a teenage girl has. Helena screams from the other side of the window that she would never do these things, and it's a great metaphor for a young girl trying to make sense of it all. Yes, this was talked about in Labyrinth, but here it hits more at the darker edge of life and adolescence.
You give up too easily.
I'm never gonna find it.
Helena, as well as the Shadow Princess, both want to break free from where they feel they are trapped. The mask analogy throughout the film is also an interesting one. The question seems to be, how do people know who you are without the mask you wear? Everyone but Helena wears a mask within her dream world. Helena is able to switch places back with the Shadow Princess by wearing the MirrorMask.
This is my world. No, I like it here. I just want a real life. Real life. You couldn't handle real life.
Taking back her own likeness in the real world. It's some powerful imagery and gives us a lovely metaphor on the duality of human nature, the light and the dark, something Helena herself has shown with the behavior towards her mother originally and her desire to save her in this bizarre world later. This also stretches to how Helena views her own mother, with the Shadow Queen representing how Helena sees her mother's desire to have her remain at the circus and controlling her life. Also the Queen of Light, who is beautiful, kind, and nurturing, but both of them having her mother's face. Gaiman had just had published Coraline only a couple of years earlier, and we see some similar themes within MirrorMask that appear in that book. The other mother, as well as the young girl traveling through a nightmare landscape. Here, the Shadow Queen only wants her daughter back, and since Helena looks like her, she'll do. The transformation of Helena into the image of the Shadow Princess is one of the most effective and creepy scenes in the film, and was one of the first sequences to be released from it. Taking the love song from the Carpenters, Close to You, McKean and company warp it into a robotic, stalker-like lullaby as the automatons mold Helena into a black-eyed, black-nailed doppelganger of the princess.
They long to be close to you.
It's perfect. Gaiman's love for stories and books is represented throughout the film as well. The very useful book helps Helena throughout the film, and the insulted books who fly themselves back to the library save Valentine and Helena from the darkness. Speaking of Helena and Valentine, let's talk about the cast. Stephanie Leonidas was cast as Helena, and she is fantastic in the role. She's likable and can also play the bratty parts. She looks amazing when bedecked in the shadowy finery of the princess. Leonidas would go on to a number of genre roles, including Dracula, Atlantis, Defiance, and Killjoys. At the time of shooting, the young-looking Leonidas was actually 21 years old. Jason Barry was Valentine. Interestingly, while not as big an age difference as was in Labyrinth, Barry was 12 years older than Leonidas. Throughout the film, it's implied that Valentine is, fitting due to the name, a love interest for Helena. Barry was charming and played Valentine rather manic and overly dramatic in his manner, which you would expect from a performer and a very important man. We do get to see Barry out of his mask a couple of times during his future vision and his appearance at the end. Jason Barry plays this role with his native Irish brogue. Gina McKee and Rob Brydon play Helena's parents, Joanne and Morris. McKee was of course the Queen of Light and the Queen of Shadows, and looked amazing in both roles. The Queen of Shadows was absolutely haunting, and I'm truly shocked we don't see more cosplays of her. Brydon also plays the role of the Prime Minister. Both of them have had impressive careers in film and television. You'll hear a few familiar voices throughout the film, coming from the creatures inhabiting the dream world of MirrorMask, such as Stephen Fry and Lenny Henry.
Information, paperbacks, top floor.
Another standout of MirrorMask is the soundtrack, which is heavy with saxophone and has a feel that would be very much at home in the 80s. This is thanks to composer Ian Bellamy. The score is bluesy, synthy, if that's a word, and uses at times an ethereal vocal track, at times simply singing Helena's name. MirrorMask was originally intended for a direct-to-video release, but managed to get a very limited theatrical run. Gaiman fans discovered the film on DVD and loved it. Over the years, it has grown in popularity, though it is still not as widely known as Labyrinth or The Dark Crystal. The film was actually released with those two films as part of the Jim Henson Fantasy Film Collection on disc, and can still be found for purchase in that collection, as well as on its own in Blu-ray and DVD, though it is becoming harder to find. It even garnered a release on the now dead UMD format for the PSP. The illustrated script of the film was released and is now a sought-after piece by many a Gaiman fan, and McKean fan as well. There was also a beautiful art of the film book called The Alchemy of MirrorMask produced. Leonidas performed the audiobook version of the film, which is available on Audible. Sadly, not much in the way of merchandise was made for the film, which I think is a shame. I'd give a kidney for a talking sphinx or a creepy human-faced cat doll. Which reminds me, I wonder if those inspired that bit in What We Do in the Shadows. Dark Horse did release a few figure sets in 2005, along with a journal of the really useful book. These are rare to find, but my favorite would have to be the bust of the Shadow Queen, which is gorgeous. While MirrorMask didn't even make a fourth of its budget back in box office, it has continued to grow a following, and I think I would truly love for more people to discover it. As I said, there aren't enough cosplays out there based on these designs, but there are some, and they are awesome. I think the film deserves more eyeballs, be they on spindly metal legs or in your head on it. MirrorMask is a beautiful entry into the fantasy genre, and has a pedigree that is reflected, okay, that is a pun, throughout the film. You owe it to yourself to step through the doorway into this world and to get close to the shadows. But be warned, you might find yourself staying.
You can't run away from home without destroying somebody's world.